Hey there drone fans, Rick here again from Drone Valley. In today's clip, I'd like to give you my prediction on what I think DJI might be releasing next Tuesday on June 11th. Now before I get too deep into the predictions and my analysis behind it, I have to say that this announcement came as a surprise to everybody. I've been lucky over the years where DJI has invited me into certain NDA events where maybe they'll send me information early under NDA, or they'll send me a product and say, hey, review it and get ready to put a clip up the day of launch. In this case, nothing. And I'm in contact with them on a regular basis, so I sent them an email saying, hey, what's going on June 11th? I haven't heard anything, and I got crickets back from them. Nobody's talking about it. So either it's a gigantic product, which has really been well kept secret inside of DJI, or it's something entirely new that may not have to do with drones or cameras or things that I typically review. And I think that's where I'm going to go with the prediction, so I'll get into that in a minute. The other thing I will tell you is that since I'm not under NDA, I can speculate to my heart's content. So what I'm going to give you today is sort of a rundown of my analysis of that tiny little 15-second video they put out, which was a total teaser. I mean, they're such brilliant marketing people. When they put something like that together, they give you just enough information where you're like, oh, I know what that is. And then the next second, you're like, I have no idea what that is. But I think they gave us enough in this one where you can kind of predict what they're putting together in this product. Now, I haven't looked at other YouTube channels yet. I'm sure there's a lot of guys out there speculating all over the place that maybe it's going to be a drone or some kind of underwater robot. I don't think either of those are the case, and I'll tell you why in a couple of minutes. The other thing I will say is this is hands down the best kept secret that DJI's had, because in previous releases, no matter how much they try, usually a picture leaks or somebody from the factory talks to somebody else and then they talk about it. In this case, I haven't seen anything legitimate out there of a prediction of what this product might be. So this is kind of an interesting time. The other thing that makes this tricky is that there's only a couple of days between when they launch that video and when the announcement comes. So there hasn't been a lot of time for analysis. Now, what I've done to sort of come up with this prediction is I've been studying the company for a long time. I'm always watching their trademark applications and I'm checking to see if they've got new copyrights on names and things. And over the years, they've put a couple of products through the trademark process that actually haven't come to fruition, or they've come to fruition in other countries. And I think that's exactly what we're going to see with this launch on the 11th. It's a product that they've sort of had out before in other countries, and they've had different versions of it out there. And I think right now there's a crescendo in the engineering environment that would make this product something that would be really important for DJI to release. And again, I'll get into that in a second. The other thing I will tell you is that I'm constantly fascinated by this company because they're not like a lot of other companies where they focus on a market segment and then try to exploit that market segment. For example, they're big into drones. You think they'd stick into their lane and just release drones and come up with cool stuff around drones. But they branched out in recent years to a whole lot of other things. They've got crystal sky monitors. They've got cameras out now. We've got the Osmo Pocket, the Osmo Action, which just came out. They've branched into professional photography. They've spun up a cinema division now that'll actually go out and work with Hollywood studios to put professional drones in the air with big heavy DSLR or red cameras on them to film things. So they're a company that's definitely taking the technology they've put together and exploiting it in a lot of different ways, which I think is really interesting. And again, as an engineer, I'm thrilled by the fact that every time they launch a new product, it's something cool that we haven't seen before that's just a little bit different or better even than things that are on the market today. And I know I get accused of being a DJI fanboy all the time, but it's because I love the engineering behind what they're building. And when I look at it, everything they do is really top shelf. So anyway, call me a DJI fanboy if you want, but I love their technology. All right, enough about that. Let's get into the clip. Now, what I did with this clip was I brought it into Photoshop, I brought it into Premiere, I slowed it down, I enhanced it, I blew up different images inside there. And I think if you go through it and you look at those, and I'll show you some example of those in a minute, you'll see things in there that'll absolutely nail it for you as far as what it is. So let's take a look at the first picture I've got up now. What I've done here is sort of expanded it, I've increased the contrast on it, and I've enhanced it. And if you look closely, you'll see the three arrows now are pointing to little humps in the front. And I think this first image that I'm showing you is the one that really gives it away for me, because if you look closely at those humps, if you've ever done any kind of engineering with robots, there's a thing called the mecanum wheel, which is a brilliant type of wheel that actually allows you to go both forward, sideways, it allows you to pivot and point, and it was a genius to put that wheel together, and it's used on a lot of high-tech robotic materials out there. So I think the Mars lander has it. I know that if you're involved in any kind of robotics competitions, my son was involved with the First League for a while in high school when he was growing up. Just a phenomenal experience. By the way, if you have kids that are at all inclined towards engineering, get them involved with the First League, because that is something that was spun up a bunch of years ago, and it's just a phenomenal competition for kids to get into, because it'll teach them how to build things mechanically, how to program those things mechanically. It's just a wonderful place for any kind of nerdy kid to be involved, because he's around other nerds or she's around other nerds, and they just celebrate that type of thing. But anyway, back to the prediction. So I think the mecanum wheels were a dead giveaway for me, because if you look at that, that's definitely a Mecanum wheel there. So I'm thinking it's going to be some kind of terrestrial vehicle. Okay, so let's assume that it's going to be a terrestrial vehicle for now. Let's move on to the next picture. Now you can see that they've got what I'll call wire or cable runs inside there. There's support structures that allow you to insert a cable to make sure it's not going to get jammed in a pinch point. So for example, in this particular picture, it looks like there's a pivot point ahead of it, which is probably the front end of this vehicle, I'm going to call it. And when it moves around, it's got to have some way to stabilize those cables so they don't get cut in that pinch point. The third thing that I'm going to point to are all these plugs on the top. Now, if they're releasing a commercial vehicle that they want to sell you and charge you for, they're not going to have these exposed plugs, because if it's a vehicle they built that isn't what I'll call configurable, which means you can't change its function on the fly, they'd be soldered in and they'd be behind barriers. They'd be in enclosed space. They wouldn't be available for you to plug and unplug and move things around. So what that tells me is whatever this thing's going to be, and again, I've already said it's going to be a vehicle, it's going to be configurable, which means if you're building, let's say, a robot, a terrestrial robot, you want to have the ability to punch sensors on the side, sensors on the front, maybe even a camera on the front, but certainly things like infrared sensors, maybe even LiDAR, optic sensors, other things that you can use, magnetic resonance sensors on the bottom. So if you're checking plates or things, or if you're trying to follow a track that's got some magnetics in it, that configurable spot there where all those plugs are leads me to believe that they're building something that's totally configurable, which means I can slap IR sensors on it today. Tomorrow I can put pressure sensors on it, or maybe a camera on it, unplug that, plug a new one in, and you can run with it from there. So to me, that's probably the main CPU of whatever it is they're building. That's a configurable device, which means robotics teams can get in there and reconfigure it as needed for each competition going forward. The next thing I'll point to is on the front, it's obviously a camera on the top. I couldn't read the FOV on there, but it looks like a pretty wide angle FOV. That would be important, because if it's doing any kind of artificial intelligence as part of a robotics competition, it would need to be able to identify objects either in black and white or in color, spatially, to sort of avoid them or to travel towards them. Below that, it looks like another sensor, and I'm going to bet that's either an IR infrared sensor or it's going to be some kind of LiDAR sensor that, again, that's going to be programmed through that configurable device. The last thing I'll point to, and I have no idea what this is that last shot they show you where it looks like you've got a handle like you've got on your grill outside, and it's got 8 sensors around the outside that light up. All I can figure is that that's some kind of indicator to let you know that all of your sensors on power up have been plugged in, gone through a self-test, and the main CPU can see all those sensors, and it'll light all those lights to let you know that you're ready to go into competition. Or maybe it's a timing device where when they start those competitions, like with the first robotics league, everybody starts at the same time. They do a countdown, and maybe they issue a command that turns that thing on and can now go into competition. But it's going to be interesting to see exactly what that is, because if you look at it closely, there's actually gear teeth on the outside. So I'm not sure if you spin that to actually enable the robot or arm the robot or what that's for. But that one had me a little bit confused. But at the end of it, what I'm going to tell you is this product, from my perspective, is absolutely some type of reconfigurable terrestrial vehicle, probably something that's used in a robotics competition. And in a lot of ways that makes perfect sense, because if you think back to what Apple did when they first started making computers, they went into education and they started giving a lot of computers away to colleges, eventually to high schools, and eventually to middle schools. And what that did was get those kids acclimated to the Apple operating system. So they started learning on Apple, they understood the Apple OS, and what do you think they're going to do when they're adults? They're going to go out and buy Apple products. So it was a brilliant marketing move. Google's doing exactly the same thing right now with their Chromebooks. They're coming into schools saying, use Chrome, we're going to develop programs for the schools, the kids get used to using Chrome, and that becomes something they're looking to buy when they get home. I think DJI, again, a brilliant company from a marketing perspective, has looked at this robotics competition. We already know they're doing the RoboMasters competition internationally, which is different than the first robotics league. But if they get this terrestrial vehicle configurable into the hands of kids in the high school environment, maybe just as part of a STEM program or STEAM program, where it's got science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics, where those kids are studying this kind of thing, they now have a configurable vehicle that they can learn about things like LiDAR and radar and optics and crash avoidance, those type of things, and they can program. Just think of what that does to enhance the engineering efforts that are going on in those schools. So I am hoping at this point that's exactly what it is. Not so much that I'm going to have a lot of fun with it, although I will. If it comes out, I'm going to get my hands on one and program it like crazy to show you some cool stuff it can do. But if I'm right on this and they're getting these into the schools, I'm a huge fan and a huge nerd, and a huge fan of engineering and a huge nerd. So anything they can do to make that experience for the kids in high school better, makes it better for all of us, because that makes kids smarter, it makes them interested in science and interested in the world, and I just think it's a wonderful thing. So I could be totally wrong on this. They may be releasing a Phantom 5 or a Spark 2 on Tuesday, and if I am, okay, big deal, we'll have some new drones to fly. But I don't think it's a drone. I think it's going to be a robotic, configurable vehicle that's going to be terrestrial, probably geared towards some kind of robotics competition. Maybe it's going to be a RoboMasters vehicle. They've been out for a while, and I've got some screenshots I'll show you in a second of where they've released those as completed devices for that RoboMaster competition. But in this case, I think it's going to be more of a generic product that can be configured by the kids and programmed by the kids and just have a lot of fun with it and learn a lot about engineering. So that's my prediction. Again, we'll know in 48 hours if I'm totally on the money or totally off the mark, but either way, it's a lot of fun to speculate like this. So I hope you guys enjoyed this clip. Please drop your comments below. If you have any questions, I can answer. I'll be happy to do that. Or if you have predictions yourself, drop them in the comments below. I know we're all waiting for a new drone this summer, even though that Mavic 2 product is hands down the one that I'm dating lately. It's the one I have with me everywhere. It'd be interesting to see a new Spark 2. I still think the Phantom product is alive, so I'm not shocked. You know, a lot of people are saying Phantom's dead. I don't think it is. I wouldn't be shocked at all if a Phantom 5 shows up sometime this summer. I don't have any good authority on either of those predictions, but let's just say they're probably going to happen sometime this summer. Let's keep our fingers crossed on that. Anyway, that's it for today. Thanks an awful lot for watching. I love putting these clips together, so if you guys are enjoying them, please subscribe and let us know that you're enjoying the clips, and we'll keep making them. Until next time, happy flying.